It was a warm Saturday evening in a quiet American suburb, the kind of neighborhood where people mowed their lawns every Saturday morning and waved politely as they passed each other on the sidewalk. At the Johnson house, however, things were anything but quiet. String lights twinkled across the backyard, the smell of barbecue filled the air, and laughter rose from every corner. It was more than just a party, it was a homecoming. Daniel Johnson, the middle son of the family, had just returned from serving overseas in the military. After years of uncertainty, late-night prayers, and letters that often carried more fear than hope, he was finally home safe. His younger cousins ran around with sparklers, his mother held back tears as she hugged him for the 100th time, and his father stood proudly at the grill, serving hamburgers to the crowd. For Daniel, it was overwhelming, being surrounded by the warmth of family after months of desserts, barracks, and silence. For the first time in a long time, he could breathe freely. But not everyone shared in the joy. Across the street behind, neatly trimmed hedges, stood Karen, the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood. She was the president of the Homeowners Association and wore that title like a crown. Rules, regulations, and restrictions were her favorite tools, and she believed no one was above them. She watched the Johnsons' celebration with narrowed eyes, muttering under her breath about noise violations and quiet hours. It didn't matter that it was only 9 o'clock, or that the music was soft enough for most neighbors to enjoy. To Karen, it was unacceptable. Finally, unable to stand the sight of so much joy that wasn't under her control, Karen marched across the street. Her heels clicked sharply against the pavement as she stormed into the Johnsons' yard. Conversations fell silent as she raised her voice. "Excuse me, this needs to stop. HOA rules clearly state that noise must be kept at a minimum after 8 o'clock. You're disturbing the peace." Daniel, still holding a plate of food, tried to explain. Gently, "Ma'am, it's just a family gathering. I just came back from service, and we're celebrating. We'll keep the music respectful, but we're not hurting anyone." His words were calm, respectful, like a soldier who had faced far greater conflicts than this. But Karen wasn't interested. "In reason," she sneered, crossing her arms. "That's not my problem. Rules are rules. If you don't shut this down right now, I'll call the police." Gasps spread among the guests. Daniel's mother tried to intervene, offering Karen a plate of food, but she refused with a glare. True to her word, Karen pulled out her phone, her voice sharp as she dialed 911. "Yes, I'd like to report a noise disturbance. They're refusing to comply with HOA rules. Send someone immediately." Minutes later, the sound of sirens pierced the night. Red and blue lights flashed against the Johnsons' house as squad cars pulled up. The cheerful celebration froze in an instant. Guests looked around nervously, and Daniel's smile faded. Karen, meanwhile, smirked triumphantly, already imagining Daniel being escorted away from his own welcome home party. What she didn't know was that tonight, she had picked the wrong family to mess with. The sirens faded as 2 police cars pulled up in front of the Johnson home. Guests whispered nervously, some clutching their drinks, others looking toward Daniel with worried eyes. After years of sacrifice and serving his country, the last thing anyone expected was for him to be treated like a criminal in his own neighborhood. Karen, standing tall with her arms crossed, wore a smug smile. "Finally," she muttered, "order will be restored." The officers stepped out, but then a third figure emerged from the driver's seat of the lead vehicle. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and walked with quiet authority. The crowd gasped, and Daniel's eyes softened instantly. It was his older brother, Sheriff Mark Johnson, the elected sheriff of the county. He had been inside the house earlier, visiting with relatives, and when Karen called in her complaint, the dispatch went straight through him. Mark had come personally, not as a sheriff responding to a noise complaint, but as a brother ready to defend his family. Karen's triumphant expression froze. She blinked, realizing too late that the very man she had expected to drag Daniel away was the one person she couldn't intimidate. "Sheriff," she stammered, stepping forward. I called you because these people are breaking HOA rules. You have to do something. They're disturbing the peace." Mark adjusted his hat and looked around the yard. The music was soft. People were talking calmly, and kids laughed as they chased each other with glow sticks. He turned back to Karen, his voice even but firm. "Ma'am, I see no disturbance here. This is a family celebrating a hero's safe return. No laws are being broken tonight." Karen's face flushed red. But the HOA has strict rules. Quiet hours after 8. They're violating regulations, and you're obligated to enforce them." Mark took a step closer, his calm gaze locking onto hers. "Karen, HOA rules are not state law. They are guidelines you enforce within your association, but they don't override the rights of a homeowner to celebrate with his family. You called my deputies here under false pretenses. That's misuse of emergency services." The crowd gasped again, this time with relief and satisfaction. Daniel stood taller, pride shining in his eyes as his brother defended him. Karen, on the other hand, trembled. I was just trying to keep order," she muttered, suddenly looking very small in front of the sheriff and the dozens of watching neighbors. Mark's voice grew sharper. "If you ever again waste police resources to harass this family or anyone else, you will face legal consequences. Do I make myself clear?" Karen opened her mouth, but no sound came out. With all eyes on her, she turned on her heel and retreated quickly across the street. Her earlier confidence shattered. Mark turned back to the crowd, raising a glass from the table. "Welcome home, Daniel," he said proudly. The entire yard erupted in cheers. The music turned up louder than before, and laughter filled the night again. For Daniel, it wasn't just a party anymore. It was proof that no matter how far he had gone, no matter what he had endured, family and justice would always have his back.